All right, welcome everyone. Thank you again for being here to our October workshop. We've been doing these monthly workshops for staff and families, and today we have both agency staff as well as families joining us, so we really appreciate that. And we have a really great topic that we've actually been asked a lot about to talk about from different agencies as well as foster families. And we have two wonderful guest speakers as well to help us with this today. So we're going to be covering navigating the holiday season with Muslim foster youth. And just to give you an overview of the types of things that we'll be covering today, we have it sort of in three sections. First, the Islamic perspectives on cultural or religious holidays, and then sort of giving the foster parent perspective and some stories from foster youth, as well as then finally we'll talk about some practical considerations for the agencies and staff as well. So in today's panel, we're really happy to welcome Imam Curnutt, who's actually based in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He's at the Tawheed Islamic Center. If any of you are in Grand Rapids, you probably are familiar with him because he's helped us so much. He's a wonderful volunteer for us and a partner for us as well. And him and his wife, have been a really great help in the community. He, has connection with a lot of the current foster youth there in Grand Rapids because of his role as the Imam of the mosque there, as well as, helping us with, they've started a Sunday school for the youth as well, him and his wife. So there's many great things to say about the Imam and how much he's helped us with the foster youth. But I will let him sort of, when we get to the topic, introduce himself as well. And our second speaker today is Ranya Shbeib. She's our co-founder of the Muslim Foster Care Association. She herself is a foster parent, has been a foster parent in the past, and that has led her to see the challenges of what Muslim foster youth go through and Muslim foster parents as well, which led actually to the formation of Muslim Foster Care Association, I think about 6 years ago here in Michigan. So she's a Michigan native as well here. And then I will also be speaking at the end, and I think many of you are familiar because you've seen me every month here talking to you all. So I am the program coordinator with Muslim Foster Care Association, specifically working on the URM programs. All right, so with that, we will start with the first topic, and we will start with Imam Kip. I also want to say before we go on that we will have time for questions at the end, and we'd really like a fruitful discussion because I know this is a topic that has come up and has probably been challenging for staff or for parents, and what to do. So all of the speakers would love to answer your questions at the end in any way that we can. And so please feel free to write them in the chat box and share them with us at the end, or during the session, we'll collect them as well. So Imam Kip, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here and glad to be invited today. As Sister Rishtia said, my name is Imam Curnutt from Masjid al-Tawheed on East Paris Avenue here in Grand Rapids. So I am familiar with many of the foster youth in this area, at least from the ones who attend our institute. And I'm going to talk just for a few minutes. I'll try to make it as direct and to the point as possible about just why, maybe even from the Islamic perspective, can the holiday season be difficult, and why some things can be problematic for some of the youth to be involved in. So a little bit of background just about some important ideas in Islam and the way we view our religion that will help us understand this all better. One thing is that Islam is a religion that has a legal tradition, right? Which is something in the West we're not as used to a lot of times. And probably the thing that you have experience with in the West that would be closest to the Islamic understanding of religious law is what you might find in Orthodox Judaism, for example. The idea that morality is not necessarily just kind of you figure it out as you go, but there's actual prescription given through scripture of exactly what is allowed and what is not allowed in every aspect of life. And so for Muslims, this is very important, the concept of halal and haram, or lawful and unlawful, right? Many of you guys, I'm sure, have heard the term halal before and what it refers to in terms of food, right? In that context, it's kind of similar to the idea of kosher in Judaism, that there are certain foods that are allowed to eat and that are not allowed to eat for Muslims. But the idea of halal and haram is not just about food, it extends to everything in life. So we have a belief that every single action that the human being does is either something that's allowed or not allowed. And it even may be something that is required of the Muslim to do, or something that it's required for them not to do. And so in their practice, you'll find that Muslims might be at different levels of seriousness about sticking to these rules, right? Because you find a lot of diversity amongst Muslims around the globe. But in principle, at least we all have this understanding that there are certain things that are allowed and they're not allowed. So this is the first kind of important concept, to realize that we have a legal tradition that is prescriptive, that gives us commands and prohibitions that apply in every area of life. The second thing is the idea that in Islam, we pride ourselves on being a religion of purity, or remaining according to the original way of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So in Islam, we do not engage in any acts of worship that were invented or brought in after the time of prophethood, because we believe that the religion was perfect during the time of the prophet. And so there's no need to add any other practices to the religion after the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so we have this concept in Islam of what they call in Arabic bid'ah, or innovation, which is seen as something disliked, that somebody innovates something new as part of the religion. And that is also an important concept to understand how we deal with holidays. Because at the time of the Prophet Muhammad and his companions, we had two holidays that were celebrated. The two Eids. The one Eid that comes at the end of Ramadan, after the Muslims have been fasting for a month. And then we have another Eid, another holiday celebration that happens during the months of the Hajj pilgrimage. And so these are the two religious celebrations that we have in Islam as a part of our religion. So then the question comes, when there's other types of celebrations going on, we go back to the idea of Islam being a religion that has a legal tradition, and the idea that certain things are allowed and certain things that are not allowed. When we have other types of celebrations outside of those two Eid holidays, then we have to go back and ask and try to understand, is this something that's allowed, right? Does it fall into that category of what we call halal, or is it something that's not allowed? And so if it's something that is religious in nature, even if it's having to do with Islam, if it's a holiday that's Islamic in its ideas, but was brought about after the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, then most people would consider even that holiday is not allowed to celebrate, because it's adding something new to the religion that wasn't there at the time of the Prophet Muhammad. So if you can imagine that perspective, then even more so, a religion, or a holiday rather, that's from a different religious tradition would not be allowed to be practiced, because then it's combining not only adding kind of something new, but also taking something from a different religious tradition. And here we also get into the category of identity, right? It's very important for Muslims in our understanding of our religion to maintain our identity as Muslims, and that is linked to the idea of maintaining the purity of our religion, not allowing our religion to be changed over time. And so part of maintaining that identity and the integrity and purity of the religion, so that we can make the truthful claim that we're practicing the religion the way it was revealed, is to not engage in things that are from other religions, even out of for the sake maybe of just to be friendly or to respond to invitations, right? So even necessarily somebody might not have the intention that they're participating in this holiday because they want to make it a religious action. But even so, it's kind of a slippery slope that even if we do it just for the sake of engaging with others, that it could slowly creep in and become a part of our own religious action. So this idea of kind of um, stopping at the beginning from anything that could lead to changes happening in the religion. So because of that, particularly on holidays, you find that Muslim scholars, who are the people that deduce the rulings on what's allowed and not allowed from the primary scriptures, have always been very skeptical about any participation in any kind of holidays from other traditions. Now, some have gone so far to even say that holidays that aren't even religious in nature, people should stay away from, right? So in that category falls things like birthdays or even Thanksgiving or some of these types of holidays, right? Things that aren't tied to a religion, but they're a kind of cultural holiday celebration. So many scholars even considered that even these type of holidays, people shouldn't participate in because it's kind of uh, something that's not part of the Muslim identity, part of the identity of some other tradition, and we don't want it to creep in to the point that it becomes considered part of the Muslim identity. So you'll find there are some Muslims that don't believe in celebrating birthdays or Thanksgiving or these type of holidays, even though they're not religious in nature. But then you'll find many others that said, no, if the holiday has nothing to do with religion, then it's not problematic at all. But if the holiday is religious in its origin, then there's agreement that it's not something that Muslims celebrate. And as we said, this is the idea about it's not about disrespect towards other tradition, but it's about maintaining the integrity of our own tradition. So things that are religious in nature, obviously things like Christmas, things like Easter, these holidays that have an explicit religious origin. Now, someone could say that many of the things around even these religious holidays are more cultural, right? So, you know, when you say like Santa Claus, Christmas trees, opening presents on Christmas morning is not really something that's religious in its nature. These are kind of cultural practices that are tied to a religious holiday, right? Because not all Christians practice those traditions. It's, you know, certain countries that have this tradition of Christmas trees and gift giving and all those things. So someone might say, well, this is more cultural. It's not really religious. So there shouldn't be any problem in participating in it. But like we said, it's tied to the idea of the identity. This is something that even though it's not explicitly religious in nature, it's tied to a religious holiday and tied to the identity of this certain religion. So most Muslims would not feel comfortable in participating in those things out of the sake of maintaining the integrity of that Muslim identity. So generally in these areas, you'll find that Muslims always tend to be on the cautious side, right? If it's kind of not sure, is this something that is compromising in our sticking to our own tradition and the original way that it was revealed or not, then Muslims will always tend to err on the side of caution and try to avoid something that could be in any way perceived as leaving the Muslim identity and taking on the identity of someone else. Uh, the last thing I will add is, especially when we're talking about the Afghan youth, this is probably even more sensitive, right? Because Afghanistan is a country that is, you know, almost completely Muslim in its population, right? 99% maybe or something like that. So the experience of Afghan youth would be even different than Muslims from a place like Syria or Palestine or Jordan or North Africa, where even though it's a Muslim majority place, they're used to interacting a lot with Christians or Jews or people from different religious traditions. So for our Afghani youth particularly, it's not only the idea that sometimes they might feel that they're being forced to participate in something that is compromising on their religious identity, but also there's kind of a huge culture shock to it as well, because these are a lot of things that maybe they even never knew existed before, or never seen these type of celebrations or know anything about them. So they have no kind of background about how to deal with these holidays when they come about, whereas Muslims from countries that have a lot more diversity in them, they're used to kind of navigating how to deal when those times come about. So particularly, I think we have to be extra sensitive for those kids because of that. And so I'll just leave it at that for now, but if anybody has any questions further about that aspect, then we can take it at the end, and then I will hand it over to our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Imam Kip. Yeah, I'd like to even open it up right now in case anyone has specific questions, since they just heard you talk about this. If there's any questions that someone has specifically about what Imam Kip has mentioned, or something related to the Islamic perspectives on these holidays that you'd like clarification on, it would be a great time to ask now. And then we can go on to Sister Ranya as well. I see Amanda has her hand up. Would you like to ask a question, Amanda?
Yes, so I'm wondering if, because I work with both a couple Afghani youth that are in residential and in one of our group homes. Now, in our group home and in our residential, we do decorate for Christmas, putting up a Christmas tree, lights, things like that. Will the Afghani youth be, what's the right word? Offended by that, or is that okay? Because I do have other cultures that are in the same settings as my Afghani youth.
Right, so that's a good question, and I think I can't speak for them, right, because I can kind of only speak to about religiously what the general understanding is, but how each person themselves interprets is going to be different. But my intuition would be that might make them feel, I don't think offended is the right word, but might feel a little bit uncomfortable, just because, as we said, these people that have never been in an environment where they are exposed to the symbols of religions other than their own tradition in that kind of way. Now, I don't think that means that things like that can't be done, because as you said, it's they're in a mixed space, and so we can't force other people to not practice their tradition in order that they don't get offended. But I think that it's maybe just to take it into consideration, right? That this could be something that makes them feel uncomfortable. And so to try, because at some extent, living in the United States, in the West, they're going to have to get used to interacting with people from other backgrounds and being around other traditions. So, that's something that they're going to have to get used to. But I can imagine that it might be a little bumpy in the beginning. It might cause some discomfort for them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for answering that. So I think hopefully some of these questions that I'm seeing also will start to, you'll see more answers, and maybe even have more questions and discussion about this as Sister Ranya goes through and as we get to the end of the presentation. So I think, that answer about how, there might be discomfort, but maybe there needs to be some appropriate language and appropriate conversations about what those things are. And hopefully by the end of the presentation, we'll definitely get to that. So that was a great question. Thank you, Amanda, for that. And all right, so I think we'll go on to Ranya's section. Ranya, are you ready for that?
Sure. Okay, hello everyone. Good morning. It's so nice that we're doing this presentation. It's definitely something new, and hopefully it'll be beneficial. My name is Ranya Shbeib. I'm a foster parent with Samaritas, and I've fostered youth, mostly Muslim foster youth, because my family is Muslim. So it's a good fit for Muslim youth. But we've also fostered children of other faiths. and that's something that we're open to as well. So over the years, through our fostering journey, we've learned a lot. The two youth that were of another faith that stayed with us, it was very brief. So there wasn't any like overlap with celebrating the holidays that they would celebrate with their faith. For example, Christmas. So I've never had youth stay with us that would normally celebrate Christmas, but they weren't with us during that time. So we haven't had that experience. However, even fostering Muslim youth and being a Muslim family myself, one message that I really want to get across is there's a lot of variation, right? So what happens in my Muslim home might look very different than what happens in another Muslim home to some extent. For example, a Muslim youth here in Michigan may celebrate certain holidays differently than a Muslim youth in Afghanistan, because there's also some cultural differences. So I bring that up to say, again, the other important point is it's very important to ask the youth what their traditions are, what they're accustomed to, and for them to know that they have a voice and they have input in this. So there's always something that we can learn. So each child, even if they have a different faith than us, even if they share the same faith as us, it's still important to ask them what they feel comfortable with and what they're accustomed to. And then for us to be open to learning new things, right? I can't assume as a Muslim foster parent that I know how all Muslim youth want to celebrate, or what all Muslim youth are accustomed to. So we need to have that conversation where they feel comfortable that they can participate and bring in their traditions of what they're accustomed to. We know that already being in foster care, so much of their identity has already been lost. And so we want to make sure that what we do is trying to maintain their identity as much as we can. And as a foster parent and as a caseworker, we know that we're in somewhat of a position of authority. And so we want to make it easy for the child to tell us what they're comfortable with so that they don't feel like they're a burden on the family. So we want to ask the child how they would like to celebrate and what is comfortable for them. So one of the things, Rishia, do we have the slides?
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, it just makes it easier. So we see that there's variations in culture and how what people feel comfortable practicing and what that might look like. In my home, one thing that was always important is making sure that, because I have birth kids as well, I have 3 birth kids. So making sure that all of the kids were receiving gifts and participating in activities in an equal way. So although the gifts might look a little different or the activities might look a little different, we still want it to be equitable, and so that everybody feels that they're being included equally. And I touched on this as well, family traditions. It's very important to try to understand the family traditions, the traditions that the foster youth is already familiar with. How did their family celebrate a holiday? What are, some cultural things that your family can implement, again, to make the child feel more welcomed and more at home? Connecting with relatives is also really important. And I know that a lot of the youth do this, but especially during the holiday time, we want the youth to still feel that connection with their family. And if you are in contact with the birth parents, maybe some of these things can even be discussed with the birth parents and what they're comfortable with, so that they feel that they're also part of the discussion. So again, making sure that the youth has some time to reach out to their relatives during holidays so that they can, wish them well and during the holiday time, and they still feel that they have that connection. Also connecting with the community at large. If there's, there's a lot that goes on during the holiday time. And here I'm specifically talking about Eid, the Muslim holidays that Imam Kip was referring to. So during these Muslim holidays, it's important that we connect with relatives and connect with the surrounding Muslim community so that the child still feels that they're connected to their Muslim community and they still feel that sense of belonging and they're really able to experience that holiday with the community. And this is something that MFCA can help with, or even if it's visiting the local mosque during Eid, so that they still feel that connection. And as we said, expectations, again, before the holiday, right? So this is planning even before the holiday happens. We want to have a talk with the child, let them know, for example, if it's Thanksgiving time, let the child know during Thanksgiving, this is what our family usually does, so that they have an idea of what's coming up, right? They know what it's going to look like. They know, they have an idea of what that experience is going to be in your home. And if you go through it with them, then hopefully that'll give them an opportunity to let you know if there's something that they're not comfortable with. And maybe you can provide an alternative for them. For example, during Christmas, if this is something that's, if there's part of your Christmas traditions, for example, that they don't think they're going to be comfortable with, such as visiting a house of worship, like visiting a church, if that's something that your family typically does and the youth is not comfortable with that, then we can provide them alternatives. And another thing I have listed here is alcohol, because I know that traditionally alcohol can be a part of celebrating during some of the holidays, such as New Year's and Thanksgiving and Christmas. And it's important to note that for Muslim youth, they are not accustomed to being around alcohol. It's typically not in Muslim homes. If they're coming from a Muslim country, it's just not something that they're familiar with. And that could be something to make them feel uncomfortable if that's something that the adults are partaking in during the holiday time. So it's important to be mindful of that as well, that it's just not something that they're accustomed to. So I think that these are all important points: discussing expectations, realizing that there are variations. So again, if you have one Muslim youth and you have another Muslim youth in your home, each of them may have different experiences. So talking to them, reaching out to the birth parents, maybe getting their input, reaching out to the community to help, especially during the Eid holiday, and providing the youth with alternatives so that they feel that they have different options. Okay, the next slide, please, Rishtia. So another thing I want to touch on is, years ago, Muslim Foster Care Association, one of the very first programs that we started was the Eid gift program. And this was because during that time, this was about 8 years ago or so, we realized that the Muslim youth were not receiving any gifts during Eid. And we know that it's important for all kids to celebrate their holidays, right? So we wanted the Muslim youth to also, during their time of celebration or the holiday that they're accustomed to, for them to feel that their holiday is also being recognized and that they have that opportunity to receive a gift and enjoy that. And again, Eid is a time when the Muslim youth, we want to encourage them to reach out to their families, to participate with some of the community celebrations. And gift giving is very important for kids during this time. So even as a foster parent, if you're able to, give them gifts during this time, I'm sure that that would be very well received and appreciated. And the last slide. So these are a couple of testimonials from Muslim foster youth, and this is what they had to say about celebrating holidays, that they don't celebrate. So this is from a Muslim youth in regards to receiving Christmas gifts. And she said, "I honestly didn't really care that I was getting Christmas gifts because it was free gifts. The only gifts that I thought weren't appropriate for Muslim youth was one year I received a Bible and a chapter book for teens that was about like important religious figures in Christianity. So I'm just pointing this out that when your family celebrates Christmas, I'm sure if the child also receives a gift from your family during that time, even if they don't celebrate Christmas, but receiving a gift may be well received by them, it might be something they appreciate. But we want to make sure that the gifts that they receive are appropriate, and they're not receiving any gifts that are religiously inclined, because that could make them feel uncomfortable. And the second testimonial, again, this is from a Muslim foster youth that lived with a family of another faith. And she said that her foster family would make sure that she had food that didn't have any pork. The adults would drink wine, but they were careful to do this after the kids were asleep. And she did receive gifts like the other kids, but it wasn't as much enjoyment because she wasn't actually, celebrating Christmas, but she would receive the gifts. And the family that she actually stayed with a couple of families, and they weren't a church going family. So she didn't have the issue of, letting them know that she didn't feel comfortable going to church. But another thing that she added is celebrating Eid and Ramadan was the most difficult time of the year for her because she felt very alone. She didn't feel connected to the Muslim community at the time. And, the foster family that she was with didn't really know much about how to celebrate Eid or Ramadan. So that was a really difficult time for her. So again, just to emphasize the importance of keeping the kids connected to their faith traditions. And I know I went through that pretty fast, but should we open for questions at this time, Rashia?
Yeah, I think that would be great. We can take a few questions for your section. I know there were some questions in the chat box already, so just gonna see if those. So I think Jennifer asked, is it okay for families to offer to celebrate Muslim holidays with the youth, or is it not appropriate for non-Muslim individuals to participate?
No, I think that would be wonderful. I think it would be wonderful, and I think it would show the child that the family is really invested in them, right? And that they support them. So I think that would be wonderful. And I do want to also note that if any families would like to visit the local mosque and go with their youth to the local mosque, that's also very welcomed and appreciated. Sometimes it's hard for the youth to go to a local mosque when they don't know anyone there. So having your foster parent go with you, I'm sure they would feel that support. And of course, we can also connect you with a local mosque and somebody there to help with that. But yes, it would be appreciated. And you can have that conversation with them. What can I do to celebrate with you? What can I do to support you during this celebration? What would make this more enjoyable for you? Because it's definitely a learning experience, and we can't assume that we know how they want to celebrate.
Thank you so much, Ranya. We have another question that came earlier from JFed that said, would gift giving during the holiday season be appropriate for the Muslim youth? So I think, you mentioned what the youth said there, but I think maybe touching a little bit more on that, giving some more details about the gift giving aspect.
Yeah, so I think all kids are inclined to receive gifts, right? But I again, we don't want to assume that. So I think asking the child is going to be helpful. Let's see what they say. We want to make sure that they're comfortable with this. We don't want them to interpret it the wrong way. So I would ask them, and again, and again, let them know what your family traditions are, so that they know that everybody's going to be receiving a gift during this time. Would you like to also receive a gift? And ask them, if you would like to receive a gift, what is something that you have in mind? What is a gift that you would enjoy? And again, I do like to reach out to the birth parents. So if there is communication with the birth parents, I know, many of them live far away, but if you can have that conversation with the birth parents, or maybe the youth can talk to their birth parents about it. And then that way, the youth doesn't feel alone in making the decision.
Great, thank you so much, Ranya. I think that was a really helpful answer. And then Jennifer's also asking how maybe we connect with the local MFCA or other Muslim foster children in our area. No, that's a great question, Jennifer. Depending on your area, I think Shireen, who's in the chat box, she's writing things, so she can provide you the information for how to connect. We do have, as the Muslim Foster Care Association, we have a WhatsApp group where we have all of the families who in Michigan who foster Muslim youth, and they're sort of in a support group together. And so we try to make sure that people can find each other within their local areas to help support them in different ways. So we'd love to add you to that. If anyone else is on the call and they'd like to be added to that, please do reach out to us. We do have a wonderful, wonderful group network of those families who are currently fostering Muslim youth. So that would be wonderful. All right, so I think with that, we will go on, if that's okay, Ranya. I'll go on to the next section.
Great.
Thank you so much for all your time. Okay, so getting to sort of the practical considerations for the agencies, and this, it's probably going to overlap a little bit with both what Imam Kip said and Ranya, but maybe the different people saying it different ways, maybe we can make sure we all come to the same conclusions or similar conclusions. So first, I want to sort of address, remind each other, remind us why this is important, what's so significant about this. And we have sort of talked about this in earlier sessions and earlier workshops. We had, a workshop by a lawyer who also came in and told us about the legal rights of Muslim youth and those kinds of things. And so I just want to sort of bring up some of those points again to remind us. So, the legal rights of foster children related to religious policies is that we have to be very clear that, foster children can't be in an environment that's hostile to their religion. So federally and according to the state, they have to be in a religiously compatible environment. So we'll go on a little bit to what that means later on, but just try to remember that as, why this is so important. And then again, from the state policy, foster agencies, staff, and families must make the reasonable efforts to accommodate the sincerely held religious preference of the legal parents and or foster children. So what does that reasonable effort mean? A lot of what Ranya sort of explained and talked about, the different examples that she gave, the practical tips that she gave for those families, are those some of those reasonable efforts to accommodate them? And then really making sure that we're not using any type of coercion, right? And coercion can take can look different ways in different situations. But I think really questioning ourselves and really asking ourselves, like, what am I using any type of language or behavior or body language related to participating in the religious events or beliefs that's coming across as coercive? And we'll talk more about what that might look like for refugee foster youth. Like, how do they perceive some of those things? And then we have a great partner, Barbara Parker. She always reminds us of this, to always say this to foster parents, and also I think for the staff as well. If this was your child or sibling in a country far away, with a completely different culture, completely different religious practices, how would you like them to be spoken to? How would you like them to be treated? How would you like these topics to be treated for them? If they were in a Muslim country and there was Eid going on or other things, activities and going to the mosque and things like that, as you're about to talk to the youth or make decisions for the youth, really trying to put yourself in that position of what they would feel like or what their families would feel like as you're talking to them. One thing that's really crucial that I want to sort of focus on a little bit, because some of this gets lost in some of this legal language or how we're talking to youth, is ensuring that we're not imposing our value judgments. So what does that mean? It's really that concept that being really careful about the assumptions that we make about the children or about the youth, as Ranya reminded us again and again, that foster youth, Muslim youth have, whether they're in foster care or not, Muslim families have all different kinds of practices and religious beliefs, as within any faith that would also be the case. And so to really make sure that we're not trying to make those assumptions about them or about their preferences, but that the youth have to feel that their religious beliefs and preferences are respected, that they're valid, and we have to sort of really question ourselves to ensure that we're not doing anything that in any way comes across as diminishing their beliefs, as trying to argue with them or trying to change their beliefs, because again, that comes into that sort of coercive nature. Of course, we need to have these conversations where we're saying, you know, these conversations have to be open, and they're very difficult conversations. It's not easy to talk about religion with your own family or, you know, your own siblings or parents, much less, you know, with someone else. And this is sort of the difficult task of the nature of this difficult task. And so, again, not creating any type of value judgments about their beliefs. What that means is making sure that they don't feel that their religion or their beliefs are in any way inferior or behind those of others, right? You know, whether it's about the way they practice, maybe what they wear, or how they decide to eat, or how they decide to have the holidays, or, you know, whether they're deciding to fast or read Quran or pray, you know, whatever those things are, or if they're deciding not to do those things, if they're deciding they don't want to, you know, partake in any of those things and they don't want to go to the mosque, all of those things have to be very much respected, and not, because again, we know also from other workshops about the trauma that these youth have gone through. And so any kind of being made, they're very prone to be able to be made to feel less than, right, in their position and their thing. And we really want to make sure that that doesn't come across from any type of any type of religious aspect. Okay, and so just, you know, as a reminder, so all of these type of value judgments and issues that can then lead to issues related to that topic of religious compatibility, right? That's the requirement of that federal foster care system. So that's a little bit about why this topic is important, you know, why we're, you know, even talking about this as a reminder. And then the thing that I'd really like to focus on, you know, we've mentioned it in different presentations, as well as mentioned a little bit earlier, but power differentials. So what is a power differential or power imbalance? What does that mean when we're talking about that in this situation? Well, basically any situation in which, you know, one party or one side has inherently more power over another because of their position or because of their, you know, beliefs or their in society, things like that. And so when there is a power differential, you know, we need to take that into deep consideration. And we know there's naturally going to be a power differential. There's already a power differential between any parents and youth, right? But then specifically between, in the foster care system, you know, if it's between the agency staff and the youth, that's a huge power differential as well, because those are the people who are determining the decisions for the youth. But when it comes to specifically refugee youth, for refugee youth, you know, there's such an added component of this power differential and what they might feel like, because they're in a completely new country, completely new culture, and there's these really deep fears about their immigration status and their cases moving forward, right? Whether those are legitimate or not legitimate, but from whatever they've been told about their cases or whatever's gone through. And we've also heard, you know, about trust issues, right? Because of their entire refugee process and journey and where they've come from and what they've gone through. Maybe they've been promises along the way at different times. Maybe they've been shifting from agencies or whatever it might be, that's not in control of the foster parents or even of the staff, but that mistrust is there. And so they, again, feel like there's all these people, of course, making decisions about their life and about them. And that leads them into a position of very low power, right? And, you know, again, that added aspect that they want to really not do anything that will jeopardize their status or their family's reunification, things like that. And so we've heard these fears, you know, directly from the bio families as well, you know, or the youth themselves, saying that there were things that happened that they were extremely uncomfortable with, situations, or, you know, felt like they were expected to do certain things but kept quiet for a very, very long time because of these fears that their paperwork would not go through, or that something, if they didn't agree to something, then or they didn't go along with something, then they're, you know, they wouldn't be able to be reunified, or they'd be sent back to their country, right? So all these kinds of fears, again, whether they're legitimate or not, they're very deep set fears within them. And of course, for refugee youth, there's this concept of survival mindset where, you know, you're doing anything you can possibly, pleasing anybody that you can possibly, in order to, you know, ensure that you're in a safe environment. And so that aspect of really wanting to please and go along with whatever, especially related to religion, it might be there as well. So those are the kinds of things that I want you to sort of take into consideration as staff and as foster parents. Now, coming to specifically the context of Afghan youth, so for for Afghan youth, and this could be with Muslim youth in general from other countries, but specifically because that's the most common now, is that there's even additional aspects when it comes to the religious power differentials. And that's because they've come from such a politically charged environment with the Taliban and what the Taliban represent specifically for religion, for example, in Afghanistan. And when we first met with these youth, when they first came over at the STAR facility, they had very deep ingrained beliefs, and they were told along the way that that they should not show any kind of religiosity. They have to make sure that they distance themselves from religion as much as possible, because otherwise they might be seen to be, somehow sympathetic to the Taliban or something, just by portraying their own religion. And so it did take us, a while to answer a lot of questions in terms of what really is religious freedom in the US, right? Really ensuring that they understand the concept of religious freedom in the US. What does it look like to be an American Muslim, and all those kinds of things. And on the flip side, there are also definitely cases where they have that trauma from religion, from religious aspects, because of whatever they've gone through, and they might not want to have anything to do with their religion either. And so you can see there's large variation of what Muslim youth go through as they're coming, in this refugee context. And so going back to what Ranya said about trying to have those open conversations about what specifically they're comfortable with in a way that, again, doesn't impose any of our own values on them. And then specifically for agencies, we work closely with the agencies, and we really highly recommend that the agencies should have clear policy for all staff and families when it comes to these religious practices, when it comes to how the staff should handle any kinds of religious observances, holidays, and all those kinds of things. So that's something that we, are really happy to work forward with you on more. Ranya covered, a lot of the appropriate language. She emphasized that, and I'm just gonna give a little bit of an example of what kind of language you could specifically use, but just making sure that it's non-judgmental, non-coercive, very clear, and ensuring that there's no negative consequences for not participating, right? And again, the aspect of having equal sort of gifts or equal things like that, but at the same time also not having negative consequences if they don't want to. So again, I'm really happy that Ranya addressed most of this, but just these are some of the types of language that you could say very clearly, right? This may or may not be in line with your family's culture or your religious beliefs, but this is how my family does it. This is how our family has the following beliefs about this, about Halloween, or about Thanksgiving, or about Christmas or Easter, or whatever that holiday may be. And clearly state, okay, these are the traditions that we do related to this holiday. We like to do the following. And then being very clear, okay, when you go to church, this is what you can expect. We've heard from the youth and their parents, their bio parents, that they don't even know what church is, what happens in church, or what would happen on Christmas. And so really being clear about the very specifics of exactly what they can expect and what each of those things might mean to them. And then being very, very clear. I want you to know that it's completely your choice how you would like to participate in this holiday. Being very clear, we can make other arrangements for your care during this time. For example, we can find other Muslim youth events or respite care, and for the staff, we'll make sure that we have staff available so that your choice is respected. And I think for me, this last aspect is one of the most important. You don't need to give me an answer now, right? What Ranya said, they can take time to decide with other people. It's not upon them to make the decision right then and there. Give them time to think about it. Take time. Take your time if you need to talk to your family, or if you need to talk to a religious mentor, or maybe your other friends here. And you can decide how you would like to participate and get back to me on that, and we can make a plan moving forward. So for both those who are in the residential homes and as well as those who are in the family homes, we really recommend trying to use that, have a very clear set of appropriate language to use. So I was just writing some notes as I heard Imam Kip and Ranya talking about, just to remind you that of the practical takeaways. So I think because we have that 5 minutes left, I really want to get to, and we can, if any of you are willing to stay over, we can also take more questions as well. But I know Imam Kip might have to leave soon, so I just want to make sure that we get him any questions that are for him as well. So Would anyone like to start us off with the questions in terms of raising your hand and asking a question, or in the chat box as well? And if you have scenarios, things that have worked out positively, success stories, or things that have been challenges for you, we'd love to have a discussion about those as well. For those who work with the youth directly in the homes, are there any situations that we might not have addressed in the group homes that sort of come up? I think it was a great question before. When you have two cultures or multiple cultures and faiths in a home, how do you address that, right? Having those conversations and ensuring that you're talking to everyone about what might be they're comfortable with. I also just want to give a chance to Imam Kip, if you'd like to say, summarize or anything you want to say before we head out.
I did have a question. This is Barb. So we at Bethany in Grand Rapids, we've had historically gift cards that go out for Christmas for all foster kids. They just all get them from, they're funded and sent out. So is there a way those could be framed, relabeled, because we're not going to withhold them from any child either, but should they be held on to till a different time? Would that be more respectful, or everybody gets them at once, or how, what would you suggest with that?
Yeah. Ranya, would you like to answer maybe around what the language should be around Christmas gift cards or gifts?
I think giving them at the same time, that would be what I would do, so that they don't feel like they're not receiving something and the other kids are.
Mm-hmm.
Now the wording to use, the messaging, that's, I'd have
like just winter break gift, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it could be something as simple as that, right? Or, if it's the new year, for the upcoming year,
Mhm.
or, yeah, I mean, winter break, you can't go wrong with that. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything so in depth. I mean, just something simple, but I think we want to avoid words like, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, right?
Yeah. You don't want to say that, or like on Easter, we don't want to. So we want to be careful with that wording, but any other like general wording that's not tied to a holiday would be appropriate, in my opinion.
All right, thank you, because that's coming right up. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your question, Barbara. So I'm seeing some great questions in the chat box. Is the onus to continue a Muslim youth's religious education exclusively with the foster parents? Let's see, I think Ranya, do you want to try to answer that one too? If you're talking about you're muted.
So if I'm understanding, it's if the youth is interested in continuing their religious education, if there is a youth that is showing interest and they would like to continue religious education, because a lot of the youth, that is what they're accustomed to, right? A lot of countries, these religious studies are even embedded in their schooling, and part of family traditions again. So it might be a big part of what they're accustomed to. So yeah, if they're showing interest in continuing that, the first thing I would say reach out to MFCA, and we will be able to connect you with somebody locally. These days, there's a lot of virtual options even. So even if transportation might be something difficult, we should be able to find some virtual options. And that's definitely something that we can support. Yeah, because if they're showing interest in continuing, we want to make sure that we foster that. And they know, again, that their voice is heard.
Yeah. That's a great question. And just to give an example of recently a youth and foster family reached out to us and said that the foster youth was interested in having specific Quran classes, and we're working to find an online tutor for them that would work in that area. And again, like Ranya mentioned, we have specific context in the area as well. So for example, there might be an Islamic Sunday school that that the youth could go to at the same time as the foster family might be going to church. That's worked out really well in with some families as well. So so that's an example. And then regarding Carol's question, Carol's a great question about what if the youth's bio parents don't agree with the youth, for example, about going to the mosque or things like that, or how to celebrate a holiday. And this is actually something that, and what about the age of the youth specifically? This is something that we have talked with the different agencies about as well in terms of what those policies are. And I think, we can give a recommendation, but at the end of the day, it does come down to in terms of what the agency's specific policy is. I know for the state and for the agency, there is that consideration of what the bio parents want. And, again, it would be something that we might recommend that if you would like us, what we've done in the past is sort of have conversations with the bio parents as well as the youth to sort of explain what those things are. So sometimes explaining to the bio parents, what is Christmas or what is church? What does that look like? And so then there can be that open conversation of sort of deciding what everybody would like to do. And then I think with regards to how old the youth is, I do think that does play a role in some of the state or agency policies. So again, you'd have to refer to your specific agencies about that. Ranya, was there something else you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that was very well said.
Great. And then Barbara asked about any general guidelines about Halloween. Yeah, I think that's the one that's coming up next week. Is it not viewed by all as a good holiday or an evil one, even within our own culture? Yeah, so I think a lot of what Imam Kip was talking about, how there's certain holidays that currently might be seen as cultural, maybe have some religious roots, and so that's where sort of that variation comes into between all Muslim families as well in terms of what they feel comfortable with. If Imam Kip is here, I'd love for him to sort of, if you want to answer about maybe what has been done in the past in the mosque or things like that.
Yeah, so I would just add to that generally, as everyone said, you have lots of variation and diversity amongst Muslims, but in lots of Muslim countries, we don't have kind of the secularization of occult imagery like we have in the West, right? So for a lot of people, things like witches or vampires or whatever it might be, these kind of scary or dark things, in the Western culture, they've just a lot of times have become been stripped of any idea of any tie to anything really dark or evil in reality, right? Whereas in a lot of Muslim cultures, they still have much more of that connotation. So that's something that I think we have to take into consideration. And because of that, even though Halloween is not a specifically religious holiday, most Muslims, at least from my experience, are not comfortable with Halloween because of that kind of occult element to it. And so I think the best thing to do is to try to just organize for them something else that's fun for them that they can do at that time, at the same time that other children might be participating in Halloween, so that they don't feel left out. Maybe they get a bowling night or something else. And even in the past, on the Halloween weekend, sometimes we've had dinners held in the mosque. We're not sure if I know it's very close, we're only a week away. I'm not sure on the details, but I think we're going to have an event here in Grand Rapids on Halloween weekend that could be an alternative, but I will update the MFCA and then they can get that information out to you guys.
Thank you, Imam Kip. I know in the depending on which area you're in, so Imam Kip was talking about the Grand Rapids area. In the Detroit area, there's also different events that are going on for families, Muslim families during that time. And I know some families might be comfortable with that. Specifically for Afghan youth, I just want to say I know that I've heard that there was a lot of culture shock around seeing skeletons or skulls or even the decorations right around your neighborhood. So even though maybe depending on how you might participate or not, but having that open conversation about why are those decorations there, what do those mean sort of in the American culture and context, and all those kinds of things are completely new experience for them, right? They might have never heard or seen of anything related to Halloween decorations as well. So that's an important conversation to have.
Can I add to that? So I as my kids got older, I'm going to be very honest, they became more and more interested in going trick-or-treating, right? And a lot of it has to do with wanting the candy. So, when my kids were younger, they did experience trick-or-treating. And they were, so, we didn't go all out and decorate and have Halloween parties, but they wanted to go trick-or-treating and they wanted candy. And also the Muslim youth that I fostered, they had already, some of them were domestic Muslim foster youth, so they've already been exposed to Halloween. Whereas I can definitely understand, for Afghan youth that have never been exposed to something like Halloween, it might be a very different experience. But at the end of the day, I would just like to say that even if they don't go, trick-or-treating, or they don't want to participate, maybe still offering them some candy. I don't know, so that they still feel that they're, getting candy at the end of the day, even if they're not celebrating Halloween. I don't know. Kids like candy.
When they go to school the next day and everybody compares how much candy everybody got, or what was the best piece of candy you got, maybe they can have something to say as well for that.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ranya. Okay, and we have a question from Jay Fed, that would you have any recommendations for a non-Muslim foster family with a Muslim foster youth to gain some education and understanding into their child's religious practices? That's a wonderful question. Thank you so much for even having that inclination to find out more about the child's religious practices. And that's really one of our main goals here. One of our specific things that we do at the Muslim Foster Care Association is to help provide that in any kind of way. We have a call with non-Muslim foster families whenever they get a Muslim youth. We have a handbook for them as well about what some of those things might be, so that you can go through, and then any other questions you might have along the way. We're really willing, we're here to hold your hand and answer any of those kinds of questions. If there's specific questions that you don't understand about the youth, we can, sort of have that discussion with them so that we can also understand, because we're not here to say that we know everything about that specific youth's practices or beliefs. Something as simple as, why do they want to have a water bottle in the bathroom? I don't understand. Why do they need to have that? We've talked through those kinds of questions, or even more in-depth questions about why do they want to stay up at night and pray, or what does that have to do, or is that really prayer, or are they just trying to get out of something, right? So all kinds of the range of all kinds of things. As we know, teenagers will also be teenagers a lot of the time. So that's really what our main goal is, to be here for you. And so please reach out to us either by email or by phone. I think Shreen can share that again in the chat box. We're trying to be here as much as possible to support you in any way possible. So if there are any other questions, I know people probably have to leave soon. Please let us know. We're so happy that all of you were able to make it today during this time, and we'll keep in touch with our future monthly workshops as well. All right, thank you so much for our guest speakers, Imam Kip and Ranya. We really learned so much from you both being here and sharing your perspectives. I think it really helped to add to the conversation, and I know people were asking more questions than I've seen in other workshops, so I think your presence really helped us a lot. Thank you so much.